Hello, everyone. So today we're talking with Tricia Broderick again, and we are going to be discussing performance reviews and in Agile and what some ups, some downs, lefts and rights that may come with that. I loved hearing from Tricia on the Agile Summit that we recently had. And
my total troll topic side soapbox.
yes, but we loved it. And I wanted to make sure that we captured some of that for those who didn't buy the recording, because I thought it was extremely helpful, and to get a little bit more in depth about it today. But there's two sides to this topic, right? There's the performance review as a way for people to grow and to help people grow. There's also their monetary side to it, right? You know, that's the point in time where you're probably going to get a raise, bonus, etc., or maybe some perks that come with being there a certain amount of time. But Tricia, tell me about performance reviews and Agile. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you about my view of performance reviews in Agile. I don't know if I can tell you about all performance reviews in Agile. There's performance reviews. I mean, the most standard kind of performance review, or when people say performance reviews, is the once a year, maybe twice a year, but usually once a year, you get feedback from sometimes just your boss, sometimes your peers, sometimes it's anonymous, sometimes it's direct, right? And you're put on some sort of rating scale, and then that is your performance review for the year. And now sometimes you have a self-evaluation as well as a boss evaluation, and a majority, I would say majority still, links their annual compensation to their review, bonuses, as well as next year's increases, merit increases, and things like that. Now, if you break apart performance reviews on two fronts, as you mentioned, like kind of the learning and the growing, and then the monetary kind of dynamic, I can totally get behind the original, very amazing intent of we need to be doing a better job at giving people feedback, both positive and areas of improvement. And a good way that HR kind of started doing it, or best practice, was, well, if we force it, then we know it will happen at least once. And and there's truth to that, because there are some that without it probably wouldn't get any of it. But for me, the once a year actually negates the feedback, because A, it's too much information. B, it's forced. So the genuine, we talked about in a previous video, the power of coaching comes from the relationship and the investment.
Yep.
So does feedback. And so if you feel like it's just forced, you don't feel really that invested, and you feel like they're kind of forcing it. In addition, everybody's got to do it at the same time, which means the quality of it goes through the,
floor.
Just drops.
Yeah.
Because you suddenly, if you're a manager, you got 20 reports, you're doing 20 of the, it's kind of insane. And versus having something where you're continuously giving feedback. You're not waiting till the performance review if there's truly a performance improvement plan level issue. You're dealing with that when it's happening, not at the end. So for a very long time, I had this stance of nothing I should say in my performance reviews to people should be a surprise, because I was trying to reinforce that we're giving that feedback all the time. But even then, after a while trying that approach and just having the summary in the performance review, it just still didn't feel good. And it didn't feel good to me because, one, I can't say things like, I'm hiring the best people and I'm creating a space for people to excel. Now stack rank them and decide who's the best. Right. I want a team, but stack rank them. And also you have to have a 20% that's in a 1 category and only 20%, because it's got to have the bell curve. Well, the intent behind the bell curve was to try and correct managers who weren't really giving feedback, who weren't really doing the job. But the problem is once you do start doing the job, the bell curve doesn't really, I mean, there's potential it doesn't exist.
Okay. Can you
And
elaborate on this bell curve just a little bit more for maybe some
yeah,
viewers that are not?
so often one of the best practices in HR and a lot of companies use is what they call a bell curve. And a bell curve says, so if we're going to rate everybody in an organization on 1 to 5 scale, let's just use that, okay? And 5 being excellent, that means you're going to get the biggest merit increase. It means you're going to get the biggest bonus. And 1, you get no bonus, maybe even a performance improvement plan, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you take the bell curve theory is across an entire organization, that majority should fall in the 3s. Then the next category should be 2s and 4s, and a small number of people should fit in the outliers of 1 and 5.
Gotcha.
But if you have a manager that has everybody in the 5, then that manager is probably not doing their job. Instead of thinking the manager is amazing and doing their job and actually growing everybody, the assumption is the manager is just being a pushover and wants to give everybody the most amount of money, right? And so they actually take the bell curve as a way to try and force managers to give feedback or to make sure they're doing their job, but they could be doing their job and have all 5s.
Yeah.
And be legitimate. And so there's been a lot of studies put out about how the bell curve is really dangerous and the things that happen. And yet we continue to use it because in an organization, it's also a great, there was language, a great way to budget. So if the merit increase for the year is capped at this total budget, that means only, 5% can be in this category. We need a certain number of percent in this category. We need a certain number. And now you're not even really, as managers often in an organization, ranking people or giving them reviews and numbers based on what you truly feel. It's like you've got to compare it to your other people and deciding, and you've only got so many in each category. The level that continued, the more I understood Agile, the more I started seeing the results of creating teams and high-performing teams and really doing this, the more that these systems were bothering me and bothering me and bothering me. The feedback part, fantastic. But again, once a year, no, thank you. I'm going to do this frequently. But the rating, I mean, even most rating systems aren't like not meeting expectations, exceeding expectations. It's like, well, expectations, if my expectations are super high, expectations makes it sound like, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And really the categories could be like, rock star, superstar, out of this world. Like even our labels of these categories imply a lot of things with people. But it wasn't till I had a moment. It was at a TechWell conference. It was in Florida. And I was having dinner with an Agilist that I've been learning from for quite some time named Pollyanna Pixton. And I told her, she was like, okay, let's go have a nightcap someplace after dinner. And I said, I can't, I have to go do performance reviews. And she's like, why? And for anybody that knew Pollyanna, she was she was just like, no, you don't, like, no, just don't do it. And I was like, oh, I have to, right? I have to, I'm required to. And she's like, no, you don't. And I was like, yeah, I do, it's required. I'm an executive, like I have to do this. And she's like, no, you don't. And I sat there, took a drink of my wine and went, well, how would I not do it? And we brainstormed. We actually started talking about it and thinking about it. And what I ended up coming up with was rate yourself. You already had to do that. That was part of the process. And unless it's egregious, I'm going to give you in the system whatever you give yourself. Because we've already talked about all the feedback. So this is just your time to go reflect from the whole year. Where would you rank yourself? Here's the ranking, right? And unless it's egregious, whatever you give yourself is I'm going to give you. And did I get pushback? But the results were
from up or from, like, where did you get the pushback from?
Everywhere.
Oh, okay.
Get pushback. Even from the people doing it, like well, what, like almost this fear of like, you're giving me too much. What are you, because there was safety. Like, I cannot tell you how many times I've given somebody a 4 and they've given themselves a 4, but then they were pissed because I didn't give a 5. You gave yourself a 4, but you were pissed that I did, right? Like, because they didn't really own what they were doing and what they were putting in, because they knew that that wasn't the one that mattered. What
Yeah.
mattered was what I was giving. And so once I took that out of the equation, suddenly they really, you know, like they took ownership for what they were doing and what they felt like that they could be doing. And the if egregious allowed me to be able to do it, because then I'm still responsible. That if somebody, I felt like somebody was using the system or whatever, it would be better if the monetary wasn't associated to it, because I think that would make it go away. You know, some of those considerations would go away, but it often is. But honestly, most of the time, every time I've done this at multiple companies, they rate themselves harder than I would have ever rated them.
So do you come back and be like, you know, you've done better in this? Like, do you ever go back with a magic pen, or how does that work? Because you just told them you're going to be.
No, I almost did in one case. I almost did in one case where I was like, are you serious? Like, you, like, and I had that like little bit of like, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
and she responded with, no, I really think I could have done better. And there for her was a little bit of like, humbleness, but also just not wanting to take, like, she struggled to own her value. And watching her talk about that, I went, I'm not gonna fix this. She wants to give herself 4, she can give herself 4. And she did. And then that next round, she gave herself a 5, and she earned it. She did, like, she had earned it the previous one, right?
Yeah.
And to watch her, to get to hear her own that, and her growth with being able to understand her value as a leader, what she was accomplishing, I could have never given that to her. She needed to find that for herself.
That's very interesting. So in Agile, just to quickly, I guess, change topics, but not really. So when you talked about building a team, and you know, this idea of individual performance reviews, in my mind, just totally negates that, because how am I going to measure people individually? I mean, of course, yes, you know, like on let's say a baseball team, you have individuals that hit, you know, their stats in every sport, right? You've got your players and you have your team. It's like the team is known for winning the Super Bowl. The players are known for how many hits and different stuff they get, and different stuff. So I get this concept, but when you're trying to build a team, it's like, well, yes, I know that that I need to make the increment with my team, that we need to work together, we need to get the stuff done. But I also know that I may not want to pair program with X person, because I want to make sure that I look good for my performance review coming up. And, you know, I can just imagine all these dynamics that may come from still measuring individuals rather than measuring a team. And so how do you get, sorry, just real quick, how do you get is there not a way that we could do this on a team level? And why or why not, I guess, is my question.
Yeah. So it doesn't have to be either or.
Okay.
So 2 things. One, there was some company, and I'm blanking on the name of the company, but their updated performance review from a company perspective at an individual level was basically, would I hire you again? Yes or no. Ooh. And I kind of like that to a certain degree, of is like, at the end of the day, all the rest is just feedback and things that we got to work on and do. But it really just comes down to, would I hire you again? Yes or no. And, but when I do, I still do often a lot of individual. I don't like the word review. I tend to just like feedback and things like that, because at the end of the day, what you're measuring might need to change. So I don't measure how many lines of code someone does or how many tasks they finish individually. I measure how collaborative they are in the team. How much are they growing? How much are they challenging themselves? How much have they been customer focused? And so the things that I quote unquote measure are way more subjective. Actually not way more. They are subjective. But I'm reinforcing, are they learning focused? Are they customer focused? Are they team focused? Those are the things that I care about on an individual basis because they inform how the team as a whole can do. And I don't just use just my input. I do, but I don't do anonymously. But I incorporate feedback across the board because you still individually show up in that team, and how you show up matters. And so there is feedback to be given on an individual level. And there's feedback on a team level. Are you tackling tough topics? Are you going through the motion? How much have you been experimenting? How much have you been welcoming changes from in discovery of what is value? And so I use the manifesto. I use the kind of culture I want is the conditions that I am subjectively measuring in the team, and I try to avoid numbers. I actually use more of feedback delivery type information and examples.
So how would we get that? Like how, like, you have your performance review. Normally it's like, like you said, you rate yourself, you have your employer that rates you, or your supervisor. How do you get to, if someone were to be like, okay, well, I know we do it this way now, how would you outline it? Or is there maybe a link that we can send people to be able to get more information about this? Because I really want to give people walk away with, how do we do things? How do we reward the team? How do we reward, if there's a need to reward individuals, how do we do that? And how do we, if there's these more subjective things, how do we really get to that? How do we measure that so that we can, and if it's not a 1 to 5 scale, what does that look like?
I don't have any one place to go. My blog does have a number of different posts and entries related to performance reviews and related to feedback as general, like whether it's anonymous feedback, how to give feedback, and all of those things. So I can give you my blog in terms of that, because it's got posts throughout over years of different things related to this topic. I go back to a first question when it comes to measurements and like in reviews in general, is like, what behavior are you trying to confirm or change? Because that's what a metric is for.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a time that I think we use metrics often as this false sense of security to confirm that people are working. Well, if I have product increments, I know people are working. I don't need that. What I need is ways to help confirm or change behaviors and how to better work together. And that doesn't have to be a metric. That can be, hey, as in the example earlier, you're the first one to talk every single time. We got to adjust that, right? And that's just feedback. That's just areas of growth and development. It doesn't have to be a numeric scale.
Okay. So it'd be more paragraph based, if you would,
Yeah.
or conversational, probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
And focused, because everybody can't change everything at once. Like, that's what I'm saying. It's just like retros. The same dynamic of a retro. We don't walk out of retros trying to make sure that we're really like, here's the exact statistics of the thing. That works in a complicated world. It does not work in a complex one. And because the reality is, a lot of this stuff is subjective.
Yeah.
And so it goes back to more of the relationship and being able to get in that growth mindset than it does stack ranking anything.
Absolutely.
Even though those numbers make me feel really good. Like, I like numbers, but no.
So you talked a little bit about retros, and you also mentioned that in a review that you are already giving feedback the rest of the year. So, they should know by the time they get to the review. And I wanted to talk a little bit about retros and like, how do you get people to give that feedback to each other to where the team is constantly growing? Because it's really easy to get on to make a retro very technical and not when you have a team for whatever the dynamic is not really talking to or about each other. It's like, hey, you kind of maybe assigned me that work last time, or how come I'm always getting to fix all the bugs, or all these different dynamics that could play on a team. How do you get them to really open up to each other and create that environment? Like, what are some practicals for that?
I'll give you a couple examples because there's an infinite number. Okay, like
Yeah.
there's lots of different ways, and it will be dependent on your team and you and your personality, right? I'm a little. I like to be a little snarky sometimes and dynamic, so I enjoy kind of being little sneaky with things at times, not manipulative, just like kind of
Like
kind of
poke the bear
like,
kind of a thing,
yeah,
or
like poke the bear. Yeah, I like that. Poke the bear, right? So one is I don't try and like when I'm starting new with the team or the team is just forming, I don't try and tackle the elephant right off the bat. Like that's just like ease on in, okay? So that's tip number one. Two is what you can do to make it super transparent that forces the conversation, and don't just mediate for it. I know too many Scrum Masters who I call Scrum mediators. Like they're not actually helping the team resolve the issue, they're mediating it. And that's not gonna get them to self-organization. So,
what's the difference there? I want to ask,
um,
like,
so you're the hub. And if you're mediating, you're like, okay, now this person's here, and this is like, and I'll be the hero and the rescuer that comes in and resolves this conflict, versus helping them learn how to resolve the conflict directly together. So I'll give an example. I had two senior developers approach me on a team once. I was a Scrum Master in this role, and they were irate because the rest of the team wasn't stepping up, wasn't doing as much work as they were doing in each sprint. And Scrum mediator Tricia, like old school Tricia, would have been like, oh, well, I would have gone over to the other developers, told them, like gave them feedback and how they need to step up more and doing all these things, right? Like, and in the next sprint planning, I would have been like, oh, so-and-so, what else are you going to tackle? Like, I would have kind of tried to fix the issue. And I would have never kind of made that discussion happen directly, because it would have been uncomfortable and I can just fix it. That's that mediator, like, let me just be the hub and fix it.
oh,
But this time, I wasn't going to do that. So now I said, well, how can I make this super transparent that forces them to have this discussion? Or at least makes it super obvious that they're avoiding this discussion. Mm-hmm. So at the end of sprint planning, I did a ridiculous amount of work where I like literally put thread up on a wall, like yarn. And then I printed out all of the tasks that they had been putting in the sprint. And I said, we're not closing sprint review or sprint planning until I'm done with this next thing. I've got an experiment I just want to run because I want to get a better visual of something. And so they all said that they finished their task entry. And so I printed everything out. I put it up on this wall. And this wall looked so amazing because it was like the top two lines were the leads, and their line was completely full of paper, like every task that they had in there. So just like the lead said, they were doing a ton of work, right? Yeah. And then I was printed out the other people's lines, and they had a couple pieces of paper, but not much at all. Like definitely not an entire sprint's worth of work, right? And I sat back and I was like, oh yeah, this is going to really make them step up without me having to say anything. So in my mind, I'm improving from what I was before with just fixing it for them. But now I'm still not even grasping that I'm about to get schooled myself in my whole new level. Okay. Like I'm so cocky, right? I'm like, yeah, this is gonna do it. Right. And I call everybody back into the room and I'm like, okay, what do you see? And I'm waiting. I'm like not coaching at all. I am totally thinking I have,
it's obvious.
Figured out how to make them. Yeah, I've got this. And so I'm waiting. I'm just waiting for one of the other developers, not the leads, to go, well, I guess we should probably do some more work, right? It's not what happened. What happened was we all sat there and stared at it. The two leads super pissed off. Like they're like, yeah, this shows this is exactly what we were talking about, right? But they're not saying anything yet. And then one of the developers went, I'm sorry, I cannot say anything. I have to say something. And steps forward, turns to the two lead developers and says, will you please let us do something? We can do some of this work. Just please let us help. Turns out the problem wasn't that they weren't doing anything. What was happening in the sprint planning was each time, oh, I have to do this. I have to do this. Well, this one's that one's too hard. That one, I got it. They were taking everything. And because they had lead and we weren't using just development team member in Scrum, there was a positional power dynamic that made the others just, okay, I guess we can't do it. And so they weren't saying anything because they were the lead, so they knew better.
Wow.
And by making it visible, by making it transparent, that's the power of an information radiator, and in this case, a metric, but the metric wasn't the part that mattered. It was actually the visibility that forced this discussion to get deeper than just, we're not working together. Like they could actually talk about what was happening, about why they weren't really working well together as a team.
Gotcha. So the information radiator is what really helped you to be able to have those conversations, because I would have been like, so you say they're not doing anything, and
that's
I haven't heard from you yet. So
that's mediating.
That's mediating. Okay.
Yep.
I thought it would be like start, just and fight.
Yeah.
Like
and because the reality is if I had done that, which I almost did, chances are the people that felt like that they weren't being given a chance were like, oh, now we're going to get blamed for not doing it, right? Like we would have put them further in victim mode. Because they already felt like they were getting hosed to begin with, and now I'm going to blame them? Like, oh my gosh, you might as well, they're going to check out big time or react strongly, and then we're going to be upset about how they reacted and not, right? Like, and this is the hard part about conflict, is often the role we see ourselves in or we think we're in doesn't mean it's the role the other person thinks we're in.
Very interesting. So for those of us who are not good with yarn, could we, would you just print it out in the future and stack them on top of each other? Could you I'm just trying to figure out a better way to do that didn't involve yarn.
I mean, even putting it electronically on on one board, I mean, anything, just, it was the pure visibility. You probably stack it, but as well to get some of the visibility to it, but it was just, it was just seeing it. So even if you put it visually in a Google sheet, it probably had the same effect.
Okay, cool. So performance reviews. I guess the conclusion would be that they're still needed. They're still,
feedback is still valuable and still important, and do it more than just once a year.
And when it comes to raises in the money and the bell curve?
You don't always get a say in these things. I am lucky enough that I now put some constraints down of what I will be allowed to be pushed to do and what I won't. I will not assign people ones if they are not ones. I don't care what your bell curve tells me to do. And I will fight HRs on that. And I have. Another approach that I have done only once, but based on Management 3.0, or I don't know if it's in Management 3.0, but it's from Jürgen Appello. And Jürgen Appello comes at it from an approach of, here's the pool of money that my team has to distribute. Let's discuss how we distribute this money.
Gotcha.
And so it solves the issue from an organizational perspective that says, okay, if I have what's my pool of money that I can distribute per my team? I don't need to care about the 1, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s. As long as they stay within that pool of money, then that's fine. And I've done it with one team. It actually went really well. It also helped in other areas of people realizing that sometimes the differences between the raises of a 3, 4, and 5 are not significant. And so it really doesn't
Matter. Just like who's getting one, who's not, right?
correct.
That'll
Like
be
it's
1 and 0.
really not a significant thing. And then when you divide it by 12 months, by 2 paychecks, but after 10, like
Yeah.
we probably spend more money doing performance reviews than we actually distribute as a result of them.
Ooh, that's a very interesting thought. So you could say, hey, so if I can get this done in a certain amount of time, and it's usually going to cost us this amount of money, does that mean I could give my people more money? Like, but can we discuss that? Like,
I can tell you, I cannot say the company name, but I have a company recently did a study and realized that they were spending $3 million to do performance reviews to divide and distribute 1 million.
wow, that's overwhelming. Um,
All for the illusion of fairness, which is never going to be objective in a knowledge-based world.
well, I think that definitely answers today's questions. And
It puts it into perspective real fast.
yes. So, what are you doing in your organizations? How is this affecting you? Let me know in the comments below. And who knows, maybe even if anyone has a specific comment for Tricia, I'll put her LinkedIn in the description as well, so you can reach out to her and Scrum Alliance for that. But yes, if you like this video, make sure to smash that like button and keep on learning, guys. And thank you so much, Tricia.
Thank you.
Awesome.